it never goes on when you press it to go, oh, never mind, it is. Well, it's live. No one watches it directly anyway. So, he might be.
I feel like these cases just like absorb my hands. Yeah. It's gonna last for 10 hours.
Okay, we're going to get started. Everyone's at their seats. We're going to talk about Hamlet now. A lot of you were here for the will, in case you weren't. My name is Isabel Smith-Bernstein. I'm one of the dramaturgs here and one of the seminar directors. This is my 5th season here at USF. And when I'm not here, I live in Boulder, Colorado. Hi, my name is Kate Moncrief. I'm also a seminar director and a dramaturg here. And when I'm not here, I live in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I'm a college professor. And thrilled to be in Utah for this summer. And I'm sure you all know who this is, but
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm the artistic director here and also directed Hamlet. And I've been here many years. But I go on system number 9 as artistic director.
Great, thanks. So we really want to get to know you and hear all of your thoughts about this production. But first, we're going to start with Brian. Can you talk about your history with Hamlet and also your vision for this play?
Sure. As far as my history with Hamlet, I remember reading it when I was in high school, and that was really my first familiarity with the piece, and I was immediately taken with it. I've been in 2 productions of it. I was in the 1997 production here. I played Laertes. Martin Kildare played Hamlet in that production, directed by Howard Jensen. He was a remarkable man, since passed away. He was a terrific director, and actually was one of the first. I think he was the first Hamlet here at USF back in 1962. So that was a real treat for me. So the first time I was in the play to be with somebody who had that much background and that much history of the play, and he was a real sage, a real generous individual, and it was amazing. I learned so much from him. Ty Burrell was in that production too, actually. So there's a name there. He's a huge person, and I'm modern fan. And then I played Hamlet in 2006, directed by J.R. Sullivan. And that was a real treat for me. That was on the Adams stage. And then since then, I just directed it this past January in Orlando, a very different production than this production. That production starred an actor by the name of Junior Nyong'o. His sister is Lupita Nyong'o. She's a very famous Oscar-winning actress. It's his her brother, who's a very young actor, and he's amazing, incredibly dynamic, and just a really beautiful soul. And then now I'm directing this production here with Quinn Hackle playing Hamlet, which has been a real joy. I directed Quinn in 2 previous incarnations of other plays, Peter the Starcatcher and Shakespeare in Love. And I've acted with him many times. And so that was a real treat to work with Quinn, because we have a real great relationship already, both as artists and people, and his wife Betsy directed here and acted with her also. So that was a really great sort of bond diving into the play here, and knowing that this production here was going to play for so long, and we were going to play it in the Randall, and it was going to be 4 times a week. I really wanted somebody who I knew really well and could also handle the text and the length of the piece, as well as the sustainability and energy of it and all of that. And the basic impetus for the show came about 2 years ago in some dialogue, and just doing Hamlet. And Hamlet is one of those plays for me that is always relevant. It always will resonate. And but right now, I feel like it's very an important message in our world right now. People finding truth and authenticity in the world, and where we as individuals land in the middle of that. And so the idea behind the entire production was really driven by trying to find a contemporary resonance for the play, but also keep a classical spin on it. That was important for me for this festival. I initially thought of putting it in modern dress, and then the more I started to work on it, the more I wanted a little bit of distance from modern lens. I really wanted to look at it under a different time period so that people could go into the play and not necessarily judge it under a modern thing with cell phones and all this kind of stuff. And started thinking about the autocratic element of the play and the sort of elements of tyrannical quality of Claudius committing murder to be in the position that he's in, and thought about the social level of play, and was really drawn to Russia and the parallels that we have in our own world right now of what is truth and what's fiction with our own relations with Russia, and specifically Putin, who is, in my mind, a tyrannical figure in that way. You never know what he's doing, pushing people off balconies, all this kind of stuff that we kind of hear of in the news, people getting poisoned, and we don't really know the truth of what those things were. It seemed very in line with Claudius's behavior in Hamlet. So imperialist Russia really came to mind. That at first we were looking at sort of a Marxist idea of it, and that felt a little bit too bleak to me. And Nicholas II, the reign of Tsars Russia, really awoken my thinking on the play. That it was still grand, it was still beautiful, the court was something to attain, but underneath that is this thread of villainy and corruption undermining the people around them. And that the players became sort of Jacobian elements of that, the masses, the people that are on the outside of all the pomp and circumstance, and what that message does for Hamlet in the course of the play really resonated for me. And so that was kind of our launching off point, sort of setting it in Tsarist Russia, imperialist Russia. I was really drawn to Tolstoy and Chekhov and Karenina, specifically Tolstoy. And everybody's just doing the Russian Hamlet, and I'm like, no, it's still Denmark, you know? And that's important, I think, because I'm not saying this is Russia. It just has a Russian element to it. The play is still in Denmark. It's sort of Western European during that time. And also time of great turmoil and change.
Thank you so much. Okay, and now we're going to open it up for questions. Darcy is here, as always.
Hi, and just since there are so many of you, and it's going to be a lively discussion today, if we could keep our points a little more on the brief side, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
So when I've read Hamlet in the past, Ophelia's death is sort of ambiguous. In this play, she was brutally murdered. Can you explain why you chose that, or if it was your call, or why that decision was made?
Yeah, sure. Just dive right in here. Yeah, a lot of the thinking in this play was trying to find a relationship with Hamlet and Ophelia that was centered on their love affair and their great love affair, which I think exists in the play. And what that is, a lot of the questions arose for me with how that news is reported in the play, that it's a speech given by Gertrude. And when you look at a lot of the historical notations of that speech, it's very confusing. It's beautiful, it's poetic, but then you ask yourself, why the hell didn't she do anything? If she watched this thing happen. And what does that mean? It's very vague, it's very odd. And to me, setting it in this time frame seemed really interesting to me to say that this is a ruler who will kill to keep the truth at bay. And this is a fear-based leadership, essentially. And Ophelia becomes a threat to those around her because, like Hamlet, her own madness becomes threatening for those people in power. So what would that be like if actually she's reporting that event based on the idea to try to help Laertes through the moment, try to make this thing a beautiful, beautiful scenario, when underneath that was basically something very painful, very hard, and also murderous, you know? And then all the questions that the gravediggers say in the play, there's just a lot of things that become unclear. Is she to be buried in Christian burial when she takes her own salvation? That's the question. We don't know the truth. Nobody knows the truth of what happened. And that, to me, seems something powerful theatrically, to sort of put that element in the play to kind of make people go, wow, what does that mean? And yeah, I like it. I mean, I didn't know if that was going to be where we were going to go with it. And the more we started talking about it, the more that it seemed very realistic to me. That Claudius will do anything to keep people from knowing what he did. And she is a threat. My brother shall know of it, she says in her madness. Her madness, to me, is crystalline thought, essentially. I think Shakespeare does that with characters in madness. You look at King Lear, everything he says is true. In that, it's just feigned as madness. It's what other people say is mad. And in this play, the same thing happens. Polonius is the one that threads Hamlet's madness through this whole play. And I think underneath this ruse, this antic disposition, and potentially tipping into madness that Ophelia then also embodies, becomes this thing where you don't know what is right and what is wrong. And so why not make that thing a little bit more impactful? It also, for me, was, and resonates around Gertrude also in the telling of it. That she herself is put into a position through the course of the play where she's discovering the truth. She discovers the truth around her husband, who she basically married a month later in the death of her previous husband. And sorry, I just got thrown a little bit. I don't know, I'm sorry, not where I was, I'm sorry.
You were talking about Gertrude.
Thank you.
Discovering.
Yes, thank you. Gertrude's idea of discovering the truth about Claudius is something that, to me, also pulls her farther and farther away into the abyss. And I very much feel that her description of Ophelia's death is really about her. She herself was this beautiful person in the water, feeling the water lifted, and at one point she fell into the water, but was lifted up for a brief moment in her life, which to me was Claudius lifting her out of the shadow of her potential first relationship. We don't know what that relationship was like with the ghost and Gertrude. We just get that report from basically the ghost and a little bit from Hamlet. But we don't know what that relationship is like. It's very vague in Shakespeare's writing, so much so that John Updike wrote a whole other book called Gertrude and Claudius, basically trying to define what that relationship was previous. But it's very vague. And so in that moment of her being lifted up, she describes her being lifted up for a moment and then being pulled back down into the water, into the abyss. And I think for Gertrude's description of that monologue, for her, is more about her own purging of her own sense of self and that is in harmony with the other female character in the play, which is Ophelia, and how those two female figures rotate around Hamlet. So the idea of having her not become a literal thing was dramatic on my part, but also to me maybe would unlayer this play in a different way, to maybe look at that in a different lens.
All right, so then there are many cats. Go ahead and raise them. To you.
The whole cast was just breathtaking and unbelievable, perfect almost. And I especially enjoyed Ophelia. She was just a wonder to behold. and she was playing that role. And I did immediately have the question about her being murdered by Sophie, I see it's already been taken, so I just want to mention something else. How did you come up with the idea of treating the flower scene with pages out of the book? There's so many different ways to handle that. And how did you come up with that?
Yeah, well, that's the other element of Ophelia in this play, which is very centered. A lot of this production is centered around the relationship of Ophelia and Hamlet. Ophelia has been forced to try to live in a box by her parents and by the male men around her. And so much so that even her father's like, read on this book, which shall color your loneliness in a way that you can get the truth from Hamlet. Well, that book, and this is a Bible in this indication, that there's this idea of her trying to live the doctrine of this biblical thing, moral code that she's supposed to live by, that's being given to her by people who themselves are hypocritical. Her father's a hypocrite. He's a social climber. He's a sycophant in this world. It's not necessarily he's a bad parent. He still loves his children. That's the other part of it. I do think it's possible to love your children and also make wrong decisions. You see it all the time. You do. Believe me. And that element of him, but same with her brother. And she even calls her brother out to say, do not, as some ungrateful pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven. While it's like a puffed and reckless libertine himself, the primrose path of dalliance treads and rests not his own reed. She calls him back on that. These people, these male members who are kind of going, you have to live this thing over here. You have to. And you have to fear the relationship of Hamlet because it's not true. Well, it's probably the most true thing in the play. And that, to me, was the core of what that is. So the flowers in the madness, I didn't want to do real flowers. It just seemed like something more in people's madness that has more resonance to me. If it's some other image that somebody says that this is rude, this is this kind of thing. So it was just us talking in rehearsal, and I knew that I wanted some elements of the heiress to be brought back into this, which is basically the thing her father was stabbed through, and that this Bible that she's forced to try to live this thing really became this idea of her father having a proper burial, her father having this thing, like she herself is trying to relive some sort of formal funeral for her dead father, even though he's been a crap day. And so that those like the idea of tearing the Bible became resonant for me in her madness to say there's room for you, because it has a double meaning. Those flowers have a double meaning. The significance of those flowers, which Isabel will tell you, she had this amazing, doctrine on this at our first rehearsal, and it's like what those flowers represent in Shakespeare is very specific to the characters that they're given to, really. And for me, it was like, well, I want to make them literal. I want to make it now. So now we're sort of playing 3D chess by going, she's giving flowers that have resonance, but also she's giving biblical passages on top of that and have other sort of symbolic resonance for where she is trapped here. This is a girl who also is a woman who is potentially sinned in this world in her relationship with Hamlet. And that burden, that sort of self-confliction in the play is also very evident in some of that in the mad scene. I hope all will be well. She says on all Christian souls, there's this element of her who is plagued by the idea of right and wrong, just like Hamlet. Hamlet borders on madness in the play, and Ophelia potentially tips into it. And Hamlet, I believe, tips into it and gets pulled back out of it. I think he gets pulled back out of it from the two female figures in the play. He does. It has made me mad, he says to Ophelia. And then he stops and says, we will have no more marriage, those that are married already. Same with Gertrude. This is the very coinage of your brain. Ecstasy is very cunning in. Ecstasy. Beat. That's Hamlet being pulled back out of his actions by the female figures in the play that are helping ground him into a sense of reality.
And then here in the purple blouse.
I love the production. I thought Quinn was an amazing Hamlet. The dancing was outstanding. I think it's best I've ever seen. Two questions. Polonius, I've never seen that scene where he's with his mistress. Were you trying to emphasize his hypocrisy? And then the other question is, explain the snow on the steps and.
Yeah, yes, to answer the question about Polonius, very much the idea of showing his hypocrisy. This play is very much about truth to me and someone seeking truth. And, you know, one of the things that Hamlet does through the entire play is he says, "Are you honest?" He says that to like 5 people, almost in his first encounter with all of them. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Polonius, he says it to Ophelia when she gives the letters back to him. There's this seeking of people really being truly who they are. And what I find interesting about Polonius is that he's saying all these things to his son, you gotta live by these codes of life, and then at the same time, he's sending out his servant to go spy on him, to spread rumors about him, to see how he that gets out of it. It's a completely hypocritical guy we're looking at. And I feel like the whole court is that, and that's Hamlet's thing. Denmark is a prison. People, the time gives it proof. Where we are, nobody is being true to what they say. So that element, yes, for me was about sort of layering that in with Polonius also. And you know, the female, Polonius's wife, or Laertes and Ophelia's mother, is not in this play. I think that's very specific on Shakespeare's part. And I wanted to sort of show this double-sided coin to Polonius. He's also kind of long-winded and funny and humorous, but he's also kind of dangerous. And also, he is on the ear, it's another ironic reference there, of Claudius. He basically is the second to Claudius. And so he has to have some political intelligence to be in the position that he's in, as well as kind of, I sort of see him as a mastermind of the whole world. And even Hamlet even mentions it. I see the puppets dallying, which is Polonius. He's manipulating. He layers into stuff about madness. He sets most of the plot in motion in this play also. We will hide behind the arras. I'll give her a letter. I'll have him talk to my daughter. Make sure we do this. No, don't send them to England yet. I'll go to her closet over here. All this stuff is from Polonius, you know, which very much tells you that Claudius is a little bit necessarily in over his head and he becomes king, or he's really unsure because he's fear-based. He's completely doubting his own sense of being in the position, which is what we see in the prayer scene, with him kind of just like shedding this facade. It's the beauty of Shakespeare also, is that he's throwing in play acting, theater, to sort of find the truth. It's one of the most beautiful things about the play to me in many ways, because Hamlet finds through the players a sense of somebody really endowing who they are, without pause, without question, and all those things, and how he takes that to try to put it into his own life, becomes this other total existential thread in the play, on top of this thing about committing a crime, killing somebody to get something else, to right a wrong. And Polonius is a layer of that. Sorry, I went off on that. But yes, yeah, the snow was about Jason Lockhart, set designer, and I were talking about Russia and like imperialist Russia, and we were looking at a lot of imagery. I was really drawn to these images of St. Petersburg and these Russian subways. I don't know if you've seen these subways. Google it. They're amazing. They're beautifully constructed. But you know, it's a dungeon when you look at it. And there was one that was this giant red subway with this escalator going down. I was like, that's like a cauldron of hell. You know, and I was like, that is what this play is for Hamlet. He is trying to climb out of the abyss of this thing. So that was where the red came in the set, as well as trying to embody the gold in the theater. Like the Randall has this really elegant, opulent feeling. I really wanted to sort of encompass the whole room. So there's a lot of gold filigree. The red matches a lot of the theater, so that you as a spectator are sort of sitting really in this room. And I knew I wanted that, but then there's exterior moments in the play. You know, we go to the battlements, and we go to a graveyard, we go to these things. So I wanted to sort of keep it both literal and also theatrical, because that's what Shakespeare does. He tells you, well, we're in a shipwreck. We're on a sea, we're on four walls up there. And he bounces back and forth through time. And so the snow sort of helped, I think, layer us into both the environment as well as the sense that it's open and kind of crumbling, that elements can come into the world. I mean, you want to mention, Isabel had an amazing observation in a note session the other day, and I was like, that's beautiful. You should share that.
Sure. So the snow and the color white in this production kind of comes to represent that something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and the snow is what's rotting. So it kind of creeps in from all sides, and at these kind of crucial moments when something bad is going to happen, so Hamlet learns that he has to commit murder to avenge his father. It snows on him, and he's wearing all black until then. So it really, that black is kind of the color of truth and purity. And then Gertrude is wearing mostly white in the closet scene. She comes back in a black gown, which of course is the symbol of mourning. But in this production, with the way that the costumes and set come together, white is kind of our rotting element.
Back here, the black shirt.
So I've seen productions where the ghost doesn't on stage, and in yours, it takes him into his bosom, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder what your decision was to do that, and if it overly humanizes the ghost, or just from your overarching thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen productions where it's, a shadow, and I think the last production we did here in 2012 with Danforth, Marco Verricelli's production, it was a shadow and it was a voice. I just wanted to make it something that was really literal for Hamlet, that the ghost only speaks to him. And the idea, and when we talked about the idea of what it would be like if he touches him and all of that, and I really wanted that, the idea, the image that the ghost, especially when he says, taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive to aught, or to thy mother aught, that becomes this kind of a pledge, like don't lose control of the thing that makes Hamlet who Hamlet is in the play, which is his mind. That becomes a literal sort of passing between father and son. And the cradling in his arms, I think is very beautiful, because it's the idea of father, this sort of transference of father to son. There's many things in the play where they talk about old Norway, young Norway, old Fortinbras, young Fortinbras, old Hamlet, young Hamlet. And that's this sort of generational legacy that's being passed down by these monarchs. So I really wanted that to be as intimate as possible, which to me felt like it seemed, I didn't want them to not touch. I wanted Hamlet to take that with him, what that moment was. And I wanted it to happen when it was just the two of them, so that whether that's a real thing or not could be debated for whoever else might have seen it. John Preston, who plays the ghost, is an amazing actor, and just a real beautiful. Yeah, he's terrific. He and I talked a lot about the need for Claudius to reach out to those that he could. He tries to touch the ghost, Gertrude. And even though there's all this pain and suffering and the act of all of her betrayal in this, he also says, leave her to heaven. And those thorny, the thorns that in her bosom lie, all these things to prick and sting her. And I don't know if that's because of his own sort of insecurity about his own events in their relationship that maybe prompted him to keep some distance from her. But he does try to reach out to her also, but because she's not there, she's not seeing him. It seemed more powerful that was an isolated thing between Hamlet and his father, and that the ghost is unable to have that with anybody else in the play. Oftentimes too, the ghost can be very commanding and very like blatant and kind of brutal, and the mark me sometimes is really quick. And John and I really talked about this as a guy who's been walking in purgatory. He's doomed to walk the night, as he says. We often use these Jacob Marley references and stuff like that, because that's really what it is, you know? He's just in this place of nothing. And so he's not really being called into the conversation until that is forced by those that mean something to him. And the fire and the ash quality of the play is also evident in him, that he sort of has an ashen quality to what he looks like, and is being drawn toward the fire and all these things, that he himself is in a place of not knowing what that his next fate will be. And that also triggers Hamlet in the course of the play. The spirit that I have seen may be the devil, as he says, which is fear, absolute total fear. You do not know. And memory, the mind, is the thing that puts Hamlet in that state of unease, uncertainty, unrest. And it's also his most brilliant asset. It's his thing. He's the fastest thinker in the play. He's the smartest person in the play. The same guy who is overthinking something will then come to a place of complete calm to sort of be able to say, I'm going to live in this Buddhist sensibility, which is, if it be now, is not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now, it be not now, it will come. The readiness is all, which is just a state of being. It's not thinking too far ahead, it's not thinking too far back. And he finally reaches that place when he's able to take action without thought. And so the idea of his father putting that on his hand, on his head, to me, was really, really significant.
And then in the green sweater.
Quinn was fantastic, and so enthusiastic, it's so down that he's all I can think about the whole play.
That's okay, it's called Hamlet.
I wonder, as a director, is that what you wanted, or you listened to us during the previews, he was so super, and he's continued that way for the whole month?
Well, I hope he continues to be super. I know, I think he will. You know, what is so great about these plays, and especially plays like Hamlet, King Lear, they form to the individual, you know, and it really becomes the embodiment of who that person is. And that's what's so beautiful about it. Quinn Matfeld's Hamlet will be Quinn Matfeld's Hamlet. So for me to deny some of that stuff, some of those natural impulses, those natural instincts, would be robbing the beauty of Quinn playing Hamlet. It has to come from the individual. That's what's so beautiful about it. That's why we keep doing it, really. That's why people look at a gazillion different productions and go, oh, I liked Kenneth Branagh, I like John Gielgud, I like Quinn Matfeld, you know. And it's just the beauty of what it is. And so I really cherish Quinn and what he brings to it, because he himself is just a spark of life, you know. And what I was really interested in his portrayal was he understands comedy and tragedy in a really deep way. And Hamlet is funny. He understands irony, he understands ambiguity. He is a Renaissance man. I mean, he understands so much. Someone to have that deep of a well, if they are unable to find humor in that, it wouldn't be a very deep well to me, really. And Quinn does that masterfully.
And then next to him in the blue.
So Claudius, in the prayer scene, I think it was seen apparently one of the most heartfelt, honest. He just bears his soul and like can't even ask for forgiveness for what I've done. And yet I almost felt for him, like I almost connected to him in that moment. But then from then on, it's like the turning point. He's even more vicious and more resolute and more murderous, especially in your production.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I feel like the play builds to that scene, really, and it's really the thing that Hamlet is avoiding through the whole play. If he had only talked to his mother, really, in the wake of his father's death, maybe it would have been a completely different situation. But he's so just completely pushing her out because of her actions and so forth, they have one encounter in the very beginning of the play where they talk about seeming and being and the reality of where you are and seeing. And of course, it's a very public exchange also, and that which really prompts a lot of behavioral, I guess, safety, censorship, I should say, because he can only say so much in the wake of everybody there. But then they immediately close the doors and he goes off about her. He just goes off about how could she? And that is really rooted in his own love for his mother. With Shaw, and I think Gilbert even says that, the sort of Freudian element of Hamlet is very profound, actually, because it's, the mother's son and all of that. And so the relationship builds to that closet scene where even he himself says, let me be cruel, not unnatural. I'll speak daggers to her, you'll use none. And he slips a little bit. But then I really feel, and Quinn and Jackie and I talked a lot about this, is that there's a leveling that happens to him, almost in this calm of everything happening. Kills Polonius, chastises his mother. His father comes into the room. He's like, look at her. And she's like, you're going crazy. People come back to me. And then he berates her for her thing. And then and he says this stuff about basically keep the ruse up for me. And she says, I'll do anything you want, essentially. And to me, it's a pivotal moment. He says, I, good mother, as bad almost as kill a king and marry with his brother. And she says, as kill a king, I, 'twas my word. She has no idea about who Claudius is. And that triggers, again, her own path of discovery through the whole rest of the play, of finding truth, finding out who the real person is, who Claudius is. And so seeing the two characters sort of come to the ground and really connect with each other, that is in a really sort of just moment of happiness, really, and love, that then, of course, the circumstances themselves present themselves in a way that then it becomes you're right back at zero and you have to go through the tornado to right the wrong, and I find it very powerful and very moving because the core of everything in the play is based on that moment, which is her choosing someone else and how her son might have felt about what that was. Without any conversation, without any type of regard. That one event, they then went into their own state of like, I'm gonna do my thing, I'm gonna do my thing, I'm gonna chastise this person, I'm gonna hate them, I'm gonna deny it, I'm gonna do all the stuff that we all do. And then finally they have a moment of clarity because they talk. And so in the bedroom, that was the place to sort of have that.
So my comment and question actually about Claudius.
All right.
How he becomes more vicious and more resolute in his determination to like he kills Ophelia after the
Yes.
and and he does the poison plot and the rapier plot. It all comes after the prayer scene.
It does, yeah.
That was actually what I was.
Yeah. No, I think they're related for sure. And I think that his coming back into the room, discovering that Polonius is now dead, Hamlet killed him, he's not thinking about it. And the first thing he says is, it would have been so if we had been there. It's like, what? You have no regard for him, no regard for her. It's all about me. And he's completely blinded because he's afraid of people finding out the truth that he killed somebody to become what he is. And so then it becomes about, I gotta get him out of here. And then she starts to say, it's not so bad, he's okay. He weeps for what he's done, and he's impulsive. That was the other thing Andrew and I talked a lot about, was people in that state of being are impulsive. They snap at that. He does it a little bit in the first scene with Montague. His unmanly grief, he says to Hamlet, which is like, come on, the guy's father just died. Give him a chance to have some emotional release, and he denies it, he berates him as a man in front of everybody. And it's that same guy that would kill his brother by poisoning him in a way that's treacherous, is the same guy who could dismiss Gertrude. And he does. He says, oh, Gertrude. He's like, come away. And he says things like, come. And she doesn't, there's like two of them, which tells you something is going on between the two of them. that they're slowly drifting apart. And I do think, yes, he should be ratcheting up to the state of, in the prayer scene, like Mackers, like Richard III, like these villains, they have this moment where they go, do I go forward with where I've been? Or do I own up to what I've done? And more often than not, they go, nope, I'm going whole hog. And that's Claudius's moment in the church, bow stubborn knees. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. I am what I am. And then he just goes full throttle from then on, which then I think prompts a lot of the stuff in this production that becomes really treacherous and villainous and really has become about murder and regicide and all the things that he did to get where he is.
And then here in the tie-dye,
First of all, kudos for evolving Hamlet. He's amazing. And it's nice that Hamlet's a little bit less morose than I've seen in some times. I wanted to ask you though, one of those new things was Claudius attacking Hamlet in the player scene. And I just wondered where that choice came from.
Yeah, that again sort of goes back to threading in this idea of a really impulsive person, that they take action and then they immediately start to backpedal on it. Because I think that's what he does. Killed his brother to get the throne, and then he started to doubt it, starts to cover it up, starts to fear it. And I really wanted to make that a violent thing for him, that all of a sudden, because in the course of the play, there's all this stuff with Hamlet that he's just like, I don't trust that guy, I don't trust that kid, I don't trust that human, you know. And I wanted that same guy to have a public sort of moment where everybody in the room is like, holy crap, where I need to leave the room, you know, because he's a tyrannical figure and he's a little, he himself is, yes, he's crazy. I mean, anybody who, you know, would commit murder to get there, I think has that impulse. And the impulse is the thing that I wanted to see, so that Hamlet immediately has proof, that's tangible proof to make him go forward. And the whole room is like, what the hell? It also triggers, I think, helps Gertrude put the pieces together later, that maybe it isn't lining up the way he maybe might have painted their romance. So that you get these clues of somebody. And I just never really liked it when he goes, give me some light, and he walks away. And then Hamlet's like, oh, I got the proof. It's like, well, did you? I don't know. You know? And I wanted what happens by the players. That's the thing that, you know, the player King says in that first thing about Hecuba and grandson Priam. He's seeking Priam. He pauses. He has this moment of pause. Mirror to Hamlet, same thing. Same thing for Claudius, moment before. And then he says, aroused vengeance set him new at work. And never did the Cyclops' hammers fall. And then he goes after him and he puts the sword on Priam. It's the same thing that happens to most of these characters in the play. A state of pause, and then they go forward and take action. If you've seen Game of Thrones, there's a beautiful moment in Game of Thrones where they have a similar thing like that. No spoilers. Anyway, but that is a very real thing. And I do think Claudius has that same type of thing. There's a moment of pause, and then arouses vengeance, says it will work, and he takes action, which becomes impulsive, and the whole room's like, what the hell? And it also triggers him to also retreat and go, I like him not. Understand, you know, he's like, get rid of him, we gotta get him out of here, you guys gotta do it. It sets the ball in motion, and I wanted it to be just a peak. It's also kind of a climactic moment in this play. That's where the intermission is obviously too. So I just didn't want it to be light. I wanted to have a little power.
We won't be able to get to everyone, but we'll do our best right here. We're in
Too much talking, sorry.
I appreciate that you and Quinn have felt the choice to bring out so much of the humor in Hamlet. I've never had more laughs because of what Hamlet says during your production. By the way, the production is remarkable. I have a feeling it's going to be Utah Shakespeare legend for the years to come.
Nice.
And one last comment, thanks for the idea of casting John Preston, who's long been one of my favorite actors in those two roles. I never thought the idea of casting him as the ghost, Player King and Gravedigger, and that was, I don't know whose idea that was, your idea was, that's brilliant. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you, yeah. That was specific for sure, because to me, those are the three sort of pillars for Hamlet in the play of people embodying truth. His father, the Player King, and the Gravedigger. And they're also bookended by life and death, really. The Gravedigger is living with death all the time and seeing it and just living with it. And that's something that Hamlet is discovering through the whole course of the play. Player King is taking literature and giving it life, finding truth in all this stuff. And of course, the ghost is the person that sets the prologue for Hamlet. And so I wanted that same thread to be the same actor, so that even for Hamlet, he's seeing facets of his father and all of those three monumental moments for him.
And then right here in the back.
Quinn's Hamlet was so good that he negatively acknowledged the cell phone. And times two in the audience. I think the audience owes him an apology.
I'll let him know, the audience. It's hard, as an actor, I really feel for them to have been in that situation. And it's where we are in our modern world, sometimes those distractions can seem simple in the audience, but they can have a really strong impact on the individual that's having to navigate that. It's very tricky.
And then right here.
With your focus on directing now, which is great, I'm wondering when you're next going to act at this festival. I thought that your Iliad last year was masterful.
It's very kind. I don't know, we'll see. Sort of take it year by year and the things that are put in front of me, all of that. I'm glad I'm just directing this year. Last year was a lot on my plate, so I was like, I can't kind of go on vacation in July. This is going to be nice. But it's great to be here on this end of it and supporting the terrific work that's happening this season and the people. And that's just a real gift of the job, So thank you. And I don't know yet. We'll see what's the next step.
And then right here in the gray, and then we'll try to get to the front and middle some more.
Hi, thank you. I guess it's maybe an interpretive question, something just occurred to me as I was sitting here, that all this stuff that happens, like Ophelia getting killed, Hamlet's mother getting killed, Laertes getting killed, Hamlet himself getting killed, all of that is subsequent to his decision and consequent upon his decision to not kill Claudius when Claudius is in his moment of repentance.
Yeah. I
wonder whether all of that, those subsequent deaths of people that he loves, could be seen as a very robust kind of comeuppance or punishment, because he's not only is he trying to manipulate the will of God, he's trying to manipulate the will of God so as to make God send someone to hell.
Yeah.
And that all seems, obviously, in a robustly Christian context, that we're saying, as something that Hamlet might have done that was profoundly sinful, and that had all these deaths come as a consequence. Everybody he loves most, he's killed, including himself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So
I also just want to complicate this a little bit. So, Hamlet wants to free his father's ghost from purgatory. And to do that, he has to send somebody else to hell. So he's focused on his father and getting his father into heaven. So, if he sends Claudius to heaven, then his father is stuck in purgatory.
Yeah, it's sort of that's the existential journey that Hamlet goes on through the whole course of the play. What is right and what is wrong? Do you act outside the bounds of what is wrong to do this? And what are going to be the consequences for him in those actions? That's his whole thing. It's one of the things that really aggravates me about when they say, oh, Hamlet's just about this guy who doesn't do anything. He's just around and around. It's like, well, actually, he's doing so much in the play. That's all he does is do stuff. He's thinking constantly. He leans, as they say in Book of Will, he leans into it. And that idea is sort of where he gets to in sort of the place of consciousness. And other people are the ones that put those sort of things on top of us in many ways. that, which is also another thing that he says, there was nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And where he gets to by the end of the play is just taking action and letting the chips fall where they may. And you're right, there's a wake of death in the course of it, which even Fortinbras mentions. The sight is dismal. His quarry cries not havoc, he says. And that's also another parallel in the play, the avenging sons. There are three of them in this play, Laertes, Hamlet, and Fortinbras. And what he sees in Fortinbras is somebody who's actually doing that very well, doing it without conscience, without just moving forward. And it's the place he cannot be because he is somebody who is plagued by a little bit of doubt that he may be sinful, or that he's going to go to hell, because he also goes to Wittenberg, which is a school which that's all they're doing is dissecting, God and religious philosophy and what is right and wrong. And so I think that's one of the profound elements of what Shakespeare's done is he's taken a character who's really contemplating all that stuff in the world, and I'm going to put them in the worst type of situation and see how they handle it. And you're right, there are consequences that happen in it that probably could have been avoided if he just sort of let it all play. But then he wouldn't have gotten to the core of what it is, which is freeing his father.
Well, in the other act, remember, it's easy to get frustrated and say, why doesn't he just do it? Why doesn't he kill Claudius? It is murder.
Yeah.
And then he has to kill someone. And that idea of conscience, Wittenberg as the site of Protestant Reformation, is the study, and it's not an easy act to do. So sometimes I think the audience frustration with why doesn't he just take care of this? Why don't know? He also doesn't know for sure. He's testing the truth of what the priest has told him and what he's being charged to do. Revenge me, and also remember me. Like, how does he walk that path? Yeah. Is it by murdering someone, or is there another path? Like, he has to think through all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, that moment in the chapel is so brilliant on Shakespeare's part. Like, here we go, we're going to actually put you in this religious confine where you have one person who cannot atone for their sins, and you have another person trying to basically avenge a murder. And God is watching over both of them, and they both have this pause. They themselves can't do it because that is a presence in their world that is just looming over them. And you're right that why he doesn't do it there is always so dramatic to me. It's just beautifully woven in that he can't be in that presence at that moment. He can get that then. It has to also be in a place where he's not thinking about it. He has to just do and be. And that's, again, another thing, which is also very sort of a religious way of thinking,
You might compare it to the moment he does commit murder in a bit of passion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In a bit of impulse.
Yeah.
And the person's behind the arras. He's not standing looking at him and having to slay him.
Yeah. It's very rich. It's very heavy. I mean, every day there's like a new window that opens when you work on this play. It really is. I mean, it's just layered on layered on layered on layered on layered. And it's just, so great to work on for that reason. I see it every day. I mean, even hearing you say that, I go, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to be looking at all this stuff. I'm gonna, how can we tweak this thing?
And then two more questions. All right, in the center with the blue.
Yes, hi. My question is, I've been coming to the festival a few years, and I always hear that a play you see at the beginning is not the same play that you see at the end. So in view of the fact that this was supposedly a dress rehearsal,
Yeah.
what are you going to be considering that you might change? That, what we could see down the line?
Yeah, and I mean, luckily we get two previews in our opening, and I really do look at that as a preview. There's, you learn so much in that first thing. I learned so much. The actors, after the show, I talk to them. They learn stuff. They're going to come at it at a different angle. Some of the time is a big thing for me right now, just the running time. Hamlet is a big play. It's actually 4 hours plus in its entirety. So trimming the play down is tough because every cut bleeds. And it's like, every little thing means something else. And I also wanted to keep Fortinbras, I wanted to keep Ronaldo, I wanted to keep Voltamont and Cornelius, in this production Cornelia. All of that stuff, because that's what Shakespeare's woven in. The interior and the political, the exterior, interior world of the play is pivotal. The social world of the play is pivotal to what's happening in the internal, domestic world of the play. Sometimes it's more domestic. So going forward, that's some of the stuff that I'm looking at, like the places we can take air out, transitions can happen faster, people speaking faster. That's another thing that you just learn over that. Potential edits here and there. And then I'm still tweaking stuff secondary today with Quinn and Emma on the nunnery scene and a couple of their scenes together that we're just going to tweak. What's so great about it is it's going to be different no matter what. It's going to be different every time. It'll be different the next Tuesday. You know, that's the great thing about it. I usually
So come back and see it again.
yeah, yes, many times. I really encourage the actors to just be present for each other in those discoveries, because they will make them naturally. And beautiful things can happen if they are really in tune with one another. And even the things that don't work, they'll know it, and you'll be able to pick up on it, and they can have that dialogue. It's like jazz. Shakespeare is like jazz. It's just like there's this sort of dance you do together, and you really have to be in tune with one another. Pick up the ball and you throw it, and they catch it and they throw it back to you. And that's the stuff I think that starts to happen over the course of a run. With time and length and resonance and all that. So it will be different. I have my own internal notes, but yeah, I don't know if you'll notice them too much.
One more question.
In the center of the light blue.
So I was curious about the election forward to Claudius. Does that make Hamlet a potential rival even before the play starts?
Yeah, that's a great observation, actually. It's one of the things that a lot of people forget about in the play is that, well, why isn't Hamlet king? He should have been elected king right away. Well, this is an elected state. Claudius had to win that election, and he did. So his way to sway public opinion was a big gesture for Claudius. It's one of the things that I love that Hamlet calls it the smiling damned villain. That's what he calls it, because he's a ruse. He's a great actor. Claudius is a terrific actor, and he does sway public opinion. It's also the thing that puts him in fear when Laertes comes back, because Laertes is swaying the people around him to come and potentially as a threat to Claudius. That keeps a lot of these people at bay, because this is an elected state. And even Hamlet is furious at it, because he says he popped in between the election and my hopes, is what he says. He took that without him even having a chance to sway public opinion. So yes, it's a really crucial thing in the play that a lot of people think about, because we think of it just being monarchy and being immediately passed on, divine right of kings and all that. That's not what this is at all. He had to win that position, and he did. And it's the thing that fuels Hamlet, fuels all the people around him, and it also puts Claudius in great trepidation that public opinion can be swayed against him. It keeps his fear actually even more strong.
Thank you. That's all we have time for. I'm sorry. We could go back.
So join us tomorrow. We'll be back talking about January 6th plays as well as book night. So we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the shows today. And please keep in mind any specific time changes because of the 3 to 6 production, with the start time of the production itself and the orientation before. Thank you.
Oh, good.
I blame Harry. I was
Oh my gosh.
No, come on. Thank you. Oh, I have
Careful.
There you go. Well, I haven't seen it yet. I forgot to mention that. Nothing noteworthy. Yeah.
Those days are long gone.
Brilliant and awful in the sense of like.
I can get that out of the way.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.